Hello, I'm John Self, and welcome to Lunch and Learn for Thursday, November the 10th. Today, we're going to talk about organizing your next job search. Our agenda, we're going to talk about the layoffs that have just occurred and provide an overall update. Then we're going to dive right into the content, organizing your next job search, and then I'll take some questions at the end of our presentation. So let's get started. First of all, the tech industry is getting hammered. Now, lest you feel smug if you're not in tech industry, don't, because the problems they're experiencing will sweep into the other sectors of the economy. Before you know it, it's going to probably touch millions of people in all sectors of business. But right now, the pain is being felt in the tech sector. This past week, we saw that Meta, the company formerly known as Facebook, and Twitter axed almost 18,000 employees together. And what does this mean? That doesn't sound like a big number, but that's 18,000 people in markets where they're all going to be competing for jobs, which means the competition is going to become more intense and there are going to be less people, less places to work. Other sectors, as I said earlier, are going to follow this. And generally, as a rule, when you start seeing healthcare have to make major layoffs, that's usually a sign that the economy has really gone through a major conversion and that a lot of people have lost their insurance, and so they stop using healthcare. The ultimate layoff impact is going to be hard to predict. Just in the tech industry in the last couple of weeks, we're getting close to 50,000 people by some estimates. So that's a big number. Before it's all said and done, based on what the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell, has said about reducing inflation below 2%, we're talking about millions of jobs because until they shrink the economy, which means people are going to lose their jobs, they're not going to be able to get inflation under control. Now, this has been a hot political season, and thank goodness the elections are over. But let's address this, outside the political boundaries. First of all, the recession was not a U.S. problem. No one person created this issue. It was a combination of factors of the pandemic, a built-up demand, people working from home, people buying a lot of stuff online, and then when the pandemic broke, people began to flood into restaurants because everybody wanted to get back out and resume their life, and we had supply chain problems. And so this is really aggravated, and it's a global issue. So if you said, well, I can get a tech job overseas, listen, the job for expatriates is also going to be challenging. The best advice, hope for the best, but be prepared. And this is important to note because a lot of people who are in the tech industry under the age of 35 or 40 have never experienced this kind of market upheaval. And they're in for surprise. And I've done several posts on this. Several people knew that things were getting a little bit dicey when they started losing their perks. No more concierge service, no more free dry cleaning, no more free food, and then ultimately for a lot of people, no more jobs. When you lose your job, if you've not done this before, a lot of people have unreasonable expectations about what to expect and how they will respond. And it's only natural to say, by God, I'm going to get really focused, and I'm going to be really enthused, and I'm going to be really motivated to get out there and make things happen. Well, you won't be. You may be on certain days, you may start out that way, but don't count on motivation. Count on discipline, because that's ultimately your saving grace. Okay, so what should you do? Well, before you get laid off, if you think something's coming, I'm going to put in a plug for our own platform here. We're offering a free course, What to Do Before You're Laid Off, what to do if you lose your job. You visit johngself.com. On the right column of the homepage, there's a tab that says access our courses. There's a tab at the bottom, in the bottom footer, that says get immediate access. This is a free course. Now, you'll have to register, but you will not be charged anything. And it provides a lot of good information. If you've been laid off before, you're going to know some of this stuff, but it's always nice to get to update it. If you've never gone through a layoff, there are some rules of the road you need to understand in terms of your managing your expectations. So check it out and give us your feedback at info@johngself.com. Tell us how you think we can improve the curriculum. After you get laid off, don't panic. Now, I know that's easier said than done, but take some time to process. Now, some people say, look, I'm living hand to mouth. I've bought a lot of toys. My kids are in school. I've got a big mortgage. We kind of have a nice lifestyle. I'm nervous. I got to get out there and get a job quick. Or you may just have to get out there to get a job quick to feed your family, to pay the rent. I get that. But let me tell you, if it's only a day, or if it's 2 or 3 days, or if it's 2 or 3 weeks, take the time to process what's happened to you. Because even though you may say, oh, I'm a big guy, I'm a tough person, I'm a strong-willed woman, I can handle this. I've been doing this for 27 years. And I can tell you, when it happens to people, it's an emotional blow. I know I've gone through it. And I one time I was so shocked because I really had been badly done by that I found myself choking up while I was telling my people goodbye. So it affects us in different ways. There have been a couple of times that I've left organizations before a layoff, and I was glad to get out the door, to get away from a toxic environment. But when you leave, there is still an emotional burden, whether inflicted by the employer or the sudden shock of losing a good job. So take some time, because there are stages of grief that people go through here. Now, if you can't spend much time, do yourself a favor. At least follow some guidelines before you jump into the marketplace, because you can jump out there really quick and you're going to waste a lot of time, and that's not going to get you hired any quicker. Step 1, understand your value. Now, I can't begin to tell you how many times people have shown up for interviews and you ask them certain values-based questions and they stumble, mumble, and fumbled the answer. Don't do that to yourself. If you understand your value, you're going to be able to be more effective in answering that first question. Tell me about yourself, or why do you want to work here, or, why should we hire you? Those are all things that you'll be able to answer very easily once you understand your value. And, more importantly, you'll find that your resume and your interviews are more focused and more on point. Step 2, establish your home office, your job search central, and create some parameters and rules. Now, if you're living with roommates, you have to sit down with them in a house meeting and say, look, I'm going to be looking for a job. I'm going to be here during the day. You're going to have to really work with me so that we don't make too much noise, because I'm essentially going to be working from home. It will be, 10 years ago, when you lost a job, working from home was just so different, because most of us went to offices every day. We felt so isolated. Well, the one good thing that's come out of the pandemic is a lot of us learned how to work in the isolation of our homes. But we are still creatures of socialization, and networking is a requirement to find a job. So you're really going to have to do a lot of work at home, but you're also going to have to be out having coffee, having lunch with people, making new connections. But be sure that your roommates, your spouse, your kids understand that there are going to be days when daddy or mommy have interviews on video, and everybody's going to have to be respectful of that. You have to create some boundaries. When the market's really tight, when you have a recession and there's a lot of competition, you can't afford any slip-ups. You can't afford any slip-ups. So, get some house rules established and get your workplace organized. It's really much better if you have a private room or a private area where you can put your stuff and do your job search, so that you're not working off the kitchen table, because every night you're going to have to be gathering everything up and for dinner or breakfast or lunch or whatever. So hopefully you have a study or a home office and where you can work. And if you have a shared computer, that's less likely today, but it still occurs. You have to be sure that everybody understands that that's an important tool for your job search, and that gaming has to take a secondary role with the use of the family computer. Step 3, establish a daily routine. Oh gosh, this is so important. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people struggle with their job search, and then you start trying to dig in and try to help them figure out what's going wrong, and most people don't have a routine. Now, I'm going to say something that you've heard before, and you'll hear it again, but it is the ultimate truth. Finding a job is a full-time job. Now, if you're making a career change and you have your regular job, and you're just lining up opportunities so you can transition from your current position to a different career, that's kind of a slow transition. That's a slow burn. But when you are looking for a job, you've got to move, and you've got to move fairly quickly, and so you cannot afford to drop the ball. So you have to be really organized every day. You have to have a routine that you follow every day. Remember, discipline is key. I always started my day with morning reads. I would check information on my industry. I would look for people who had gotten fired, because those were leads. I would look for people that I knew who were in the news, and I would use that as a pretense to send them an email and try to engage with them and get them involved in my search, help me sort out any leads or any business intelligence they can provide. It's amazing how sometimes somebody who lives in a city 400 miles away might write back and say, well, John, you just need to be aware of this. There's a real upheaval in this organization in town, and there are probably going to be some changes. That's a good tip to get set up a Google alert, so if anything hits the papers about executives or managers or supervisors being fired, you'll know about it. And you want to be in the door first. To be perfectly honest, being the last person in the door is not as good as being the first person in the door. I don't care what anybody said. But you need to establish a routine. You've got to stay abreast of industry developments. You don't want to look like you're out of touch. If there's been a big layoff someplace else, not knowing about it is not a good thing if you're in a job search. And especially if you're talking to people that are thinking about trying to help you, you have to assure people that you're on top of it. You're on your game, and being informed and staying informed about what's happening in your industry is really critical. Aside from the fact that when you go into interviews, you may be asked certain questions about developments. And if you don't know, that's a pretty bad thing. The worst thing a candidate can say is, beside lying on something, is saying, I don't know. Especially if it's something they should know. Step 4. Finalize your resume. Now, first of all, if you already understand your value and you've built your value brand statement, which is, let me just quickly go back and talk about that. Value brand statement, it is a narrative built off of your signature strengths supported by your quantifiable achievements, and it's a 250 to 300 word statement that you will use parts and bits of in answering all of those values questions. So it'll also help you be more focused on your resume. And when you finalize your resume, you're not really finalizing it. Okay, what you're doing is you are getting a good template. I hate to use that word, but that's essentially it'll have all of your information, your whole work history. But if you haven't been in the job market in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, you have to understand that because of electronic scanning and automation on scanning of resumes, you have to customize that resume in order to even get to a human recruiter. You can be 100% qualified. You can be a perfect match. But if you submit a generic resume, that chances are 19 out of 20 times you will not be picked. Why? Because there's the people who are getting contacted by the recruiters are the ones that the resume scanning system says these people are the best qualified. I know that sounds really frustrating, but that's the way it is. I know one guy told me, he said, I just think this is ridiculous. They need to change this. And I said, Roger, you're not going to win if you want to have an argument with a computer. Okay? And companies are not going to change because they're trying to use automation to get bias out of the system, to reduce the cost of and time to hire. And so automation is an important step forward for companies to improve the efficiency of their employment process. Are there problems with this? Oh, not only yes, but hell yes. But this system is here to stay. It will get better, but it's going to require you to always submit a resume that includes the keywords and phrases from the job description. So if a resume writer says, oh, don't worry about your resume, I've charged you $750 or $800 or $500 or whatever they charge you, and it's a cool design, it's going to catch their eye, and you can just use this because I've optimized it for your industry. Bull. Because it may be optimized for the industry, and that's good. Okay, that's good. But if it's not optimized for the job description that the computer is scanning for, that's not good. And if you don't have a good scan score, you're not going to get picked up. I don't care how pretty your resume is. And so while we're at it, you're finalizing your resume. Let's talk about that briefly. We have a course on it in our catalog of courses, and it's a detailed course, and you need to look at it if you haven't done a resume in a while. First of all, my philosophy is you can get a resume writer to help you with the content. That's important. Don't buy the design. They can do a nice design for you, but don't pay extra for that because, to be honest, the scanner doesn't care what your resume looks like. And if it's a multi-column resume, that may look good for the recruiter, but if you have to revise it, that's going to can throw things out of sync. And so suddenly, the formatting's all fouled up. So don't do it because you're going to have to update your resume for every job you pursue. So get a straightforward resume. I tell clients, use a plain text resume initially to submit to the computer because that will minimize the chance you're going to get kicked out for formatting issues. And when the recruiter calls you, you can always say, well, thank you for calling. I'm really interested in this job. I'm really pleased you called. I've just updated my resume and put it into a more readable format. This one I submitted was for the computer. Could I send this to you? And of course they're going to say yes, and of course then you ask for their email address, and now that's an important thing to have because you can send the resume and then follow up with a video email of you expressing your interest in the job. Most people don't send video emails, and so what does that do? Well, that distinguishes your brand. That differentiates you from the competitors, of which there will be many. So that's the point on finalizing the resume. There's a lot to that subject, so check out our courses at guidingyourcareer@johngself.com. Step 5, update, enhance your LinkedIn profile. Okay, this is something that a lot of people don't do. They don't have pictures, and it's a train wreck. It's a mess. And let me tell you why this is important. Because companies are beginning to use automation in a way similar to what they did with resumes. They used automation to scan the resumes. You submitted one online. That was never read by a human. 8 out of 10 resumes submitted are never seen by a human. It was read by a computer. Well, guess what? Now they're creating software programs. They're already in existence that are being rolled out where companies will use software to source candidates. And where are they going to be looking? More than likely, they're going to be looking at the preeminent networking business platform, which is LinkedIn. And if your profile is just kind of blah, you're going to get passed over. If you have a terrible picture, you're going to get passed over. There's some recruiters that still have to do the manual review of all the LinkedIn profiles. So you want a great picture that's engaging, that shows your personality. You want a headline under your name that says what you do, but that it conveys value. Why should we hire you? And then you want to put some of your signature skills and your top 5 LinkedIn hashtags that describe who you are. And you do that by just testing them when you do a post. you can do a simulated post and create hashtags that you would like people to use to describe you, and then you can see how they rate. If they don't pop up immediately, then they're not something you want to use. So, but you want to also include about 4 or 5 hashtags. Now, stop briefly here, since we mentioned hashtags. You need to post a lot in order to catch people's attention and build your visibility for the computers. It's important to use hashtags. Now, there is a big debate. A lot of people are very opinionated on this. Some people say use 2 or 3, no more, because everybody will think you're a spammer. Well, you care what everybody else thinks, or you care what the computer thinks? I vote for the computer. And in fact, I've never had somebody say, well, I didn't like you because you used 5 or 6 hashtags, because that's how people search for you. So, don't ever use more than 9. I think that's kind of several people have talked about this, and we're all contrarian coaches. We wouldn't go more than 9, but Facebook will allow you to list 5. LinkedIn will allow you to use 5 on your profile. Now, your profile has a limitation of about 220 characters on that line when you're filling out the form in your profile section, so you have to play with this. You don't want a headline that's truncated. In other words, you don't want a headline that says, innovative leader, blah, ... You want to be sure that you're described completely before you start adding anything else. And you have to write it very, very in a very focused, tight way, because you can't. If you want to avoid truncation with your headline, you've got to stay in the 40 to 50 character range. Okay, it's kind of like newspaper editors writing headlines. Step 6: recruit reference panels and interview them for insight. Okay. Now, you've finalized your resume, you've updated your LinkedIn profile, because that's how candidates are going to get selected for review. The LinkedIn profile is going to become your first interview before the resume. And now you have to recruit your references. And you do that on the front end of the search so that you can get actionable business intelligence from them to help you prepare for interviews. And you do that by saying, Mr. Reynolds, I really enjoyed working for you over the years, and I, got laid off in the job that I'm in my current position, and it was disappointing, but it was, a tight market, and there were some strategic errors made, and before I got there, and it resulted in they had to cut expenses. But I really want to learn something from this, and I want to take my career to the next level. Would you mind? And you're not going to offend me. Would you mind, besides being a reference for me, would you mind telling me what you really liked about me, and what you didn't like about me, and what you thought I did really well, and what you wish I'd never do again, and how I did things, and what you liked about that and didn't like, and what you thought my biggest weaknesses are? You get the picture. Because when you get all that information, you're now going to have ideas how to answer questions when those issues come up. And if you have 2 or 3 negatives that you know about, sometimes that information will allow you to take those negatives off the table by saying, well, my weaknesses are X, and here's what I've done. I'm aware of this, and here's what I've done so that is mitigated. So you acknowledge your weakness, you then talk about how you've learned from that, and you pivot to here's what I've done, and you make it a positive response. So that's the one reason you want to recruit your references on the front end. If you're a supervisor and manager, 4 or 5 references are good. Now, somebody said, how many references should you submit? I would always submit at least 4. If they ask for 3, still send 4, because if somebody's not available or if somebody's busy and doesn't return the phone call, they don't have to delay the search waiting for your references to be responsive. Now, if you're an executive, you may go through 10 or 12 or 15 searches. That's not uncommon. And so what you have to do is get enough people in your reference panel so that you don't just use 3 or 4 or 5 people, because they will develop what is called reference fatigue. And so, they just get so many phone calls, they get sort of tired, and they're just going to be delighted when you get a job because they're tired of taking the calls. They want to help you, and they don't ever really undercut you, but what they will do is perhaps not be as enthusiastic. They don't mean to, but it's just human. It's just a human reaction. They won't be as enthusiastic as you would like them to be. So if you're an executive, be sure you have maybe a panel of 8, 10, or 12 people that might be possible references, and always submit 4. Never submit your references. Never submit your references until they are requested. Why? Because A, you just don't do that. And second, when they ask for the references, then you kind of know where they are in the search and you kind of know that you're being seriously considered. Okay? So that's important. Don't submit your references. Don't lose. You don't have a lot of control in the search process, but when they ask for your references, that's a signpost that kind of tells you where they are and where you stand. So don't give that up. If you've been laid off, even if it's through no fault of your own, you need a very tightly worded positive exit statement. You don't want to diss the people. You don't want to talk about how frustrated you were that management screwed up and it cost you the job and it really created a hardship for your family. That's great. Everybody probably assumed that. Don't go there. Okay? Write a good exit statement and be sure that even if you did something really dumb and got fired, you might say, well, I made a decision. It wasn't the right decision, and they decided not to keep me in the organization. And it was frustrating, and I tried to do the right thing, but let me tell you what I've learned. And let me tell you how I think it's going to make me a better leader for another organization. And then build your case. Make your case. And just pivot away from the negative part as quickly as possible. Step 9, send out your first email update. Now, some people say, I don't want anybody to know that I've been laid off. Oh, give me a break. Get over it. Get out of your head. And because some of these people that you notify may be the people who can share with you actionable intelligence that helps you pick up on leads about new openings. The first email should be, hey, this has happened. I'm going to take a couple of weeks. I'm way overdue for some rest. I'm going to take a couple of weeks and kind of think about which way I want to go with my career, and I'll keep you informed. Thank you for your support. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your networking over the years. Whatever is appropriate, and then let it go. But be positive. Don't get into too many details. They don't want to hear because they may be worried about their own layoff. But just get it out there because some of those people might be willing or might be able to help you. Secondly, then after you've gone 2 or 3 months. Or a month, and you say, okay, as you know, I'm in job search. This is kind of my ideal job. And if you hear about anything, let me know. And send that email out and make it very positive, very, upbeat. Don't sound like, you're panicky. Don't let them see this. Don't let them see you sweat. Okay. Your messaging should always be positive, and keep updating them. Even if it's been 6 or 8 months, you want to send out an email that says, I've looked at several things, and a couple of I've turned down because they turned out not to be a really good fit for me. But I remain optimistic. I am really I'm encouraged by the feedback I'm getting, and I'm enjoying the experience. Okay. Now, I know some people think a job search is like getting a root canal without Xylocaine, but always try to be positive. Nobody wants to hear negativity. Step 10, post on LinkedIn 3 to 4 times a week. Why? Because recruiters are on LinkedIn 95% of the time. 95% of them are on every day of the week because the ones that don't have automation are looking at profiles to sort candidates. So post. Look for things that you can create original content with. Look for news stories that are interesting, that are about your industry or about an innovation. Stay away from politics. Stay away from religion. But be visible. Why? Because every time you post, your picture and your title, your title from your LinkedIn profile will show up. That's why it is so important to have a title that tells who you are and what your value is. Step 11. 5 to 6 hours a day you have to devote to your job search. Now, some people say, well, I'm really struggling. I'd say, okay, tell me how much time you're spending at this every day. Well, I go in the morning about 9 or 10, and I try to finish up by noon. Tilt. That's a bad answer. Let me tell you why. Because this is a full-time job. 10 o'clock in the morning to noon is not a full-time job. That's not a full-time commitment. It's not a disciplined commitment. If you really want to get in and get the best job you can possibly get, then you're going to have to work it hard. You're going to have to get up and you're going to have to spend 5 to 6 hours a day networking, sending out emails, looking through job boards, looking for information on healthcare organizations or whatever industry you're in a variety of settings on Google and through professional journals, that sort of thing. And you've got to be talking to people. And some people say, I just don't feel comfortable doing that. Get out of your comfort zone. You're going to die in your comfort zone. You're going to limit your career in your comfort zone. You've got to push yourself to connect and make friends with people. Why? Because you're creating career equity. That's what you're doing when you build your network, okay? You've got to really work at it. Now, Friday afternoons, that's understandable. Not a lot happens in the world of executive recruiting or job search or whatever on Friday afternoons. At that point, everybody's trying to wrap up for the week, and that's what you probably need to be doing as well. Now, you may get turned down for a job, and it may really throw you for a loop. I've seen it happen. I've experienced that. I've gone through it, so I know what it's like. And that may be the day where you just have to take off early and go meet your friends for a beer, or just go for a walk, or go play golf, or go do something that you take your mind off of the setback and the emotional disappointment. But you got to get back the next day and get back on that horse that bucked you. If it bucked you off, great, get back on the horse. You don't have an option here. And so you're not going to be effective if you're really upset, really sad. I saw a guy who he got really screwed over by his employer. Really, as bad as I've ever seen. And he had this job and he thought he was going to get it, and he didn't. And he was devastated. And he called me from the back porch of his condo, and he was crying. And he just needed somebody to listen to. He didn't want his wife to see him. He didn't want his kids to see him. And he was just devastated. Well, sometimes you have to take that time and get it out of your system. Don't try to be a strong man. Don't try to be this, because you're not. You're a human being, and you're going to have disappointments. You're going to be down. And that's one of the things that a good coach can really help you with, is they can be available for you, to listen to you, and pick you up when you need it the most. And not everybody does that. Not everybody has that. But don't discount when you get disappointed. You need to take a step back, and that may mean an afternoon off. Number 12, step 12, develop your support network. Now, it's really important to have a group of people who can help you and who you can kind of rotate around and share your frustration. When you get down in the dumps, your spouse or your partner does not want to hear about it all the time. It can do damage to a relationship. And so you really need to, just like you manage your career, you have to manage your relationship, your personal relationship, your intimate relationships with people through a job loss. So, one of the things in our system, most of our education is online. That makes it cheaper. But what we do is we augment it with online. What we do is augment it with online live coaching. And it's, twice a month for 45 minutes. And if you need more help, if you need an SOS, I feel like a friend of mine who was a doctor from North Carolina said, I feel like hammered whale shit. Well, pardon that. But if you do, sometimes you just text and say, John, I just need to unload, man. I'm feeling really bad. A good coach is going to, if they've got time, they're going to take the time, because we're in the people business. You can't do this job unless you really care about the people you're trying to help, and if you don't care about people in general. And so that's part of what we try to do for our clients. Step 13, do not give up and do not get discouraged. That is easier said than done, and that's why you need somebody to lift you up. And you can't keep dumping on your wife. You can't expect your wife to do it, or your partner, or or even your close network. Sometimes it takes somebody else who knows what the drill is and what it's like. I deal with people every day of every week who are going through great transition, and some are happy warriors and some are really struggling. But we're here to help you. So let's talk about some questions that have come in. Okay, here's one. Is it bad to apply too many times for a job? Okay, well, let's provide some context. Don't apply for too many jobs for the same company, okay? And what that means is don't just go through and apply for everything that's there hoping something will work out, because that damages your brand and it irritates the employer. You're just going to be gumming up the system, especially if it's more manual than automated. So don't do that. Apply for the jobs that you have at least a 90% qualification with, because keep in mind, more often than not, whether it's iHire, ZipRecruiter, or Indeed, or the company's website, there are scanners that are reviewing your application. Now, some of the job boards will go ahead and submit underqualified people. Really frustrating, but they do. And sometimes the employer, we don't always make the algorithms as strong as we should. But let me tell you this, the day when you would send your resume to a recruiter who might see something about your background or see somebody they know that you worked with and that they said you were really good, there's not that opportunity as much today for that human touch, especially at the early stages of the search. It's all going to be done by automation more and more and more. Recruiters still are manual. They still have the human touch. But most recruiters only handle about 30% of all the job placements. So, you want to be sure that you're not applying for jobs that you can't possibly qualify for. So look for the 85, 90%. I suggest 90%. You got to qualify at least 90% of the criteria. The next thing is you got to get a job. So if you're in a small town and there's only one or two employers that have the ability to provide you with the level of income that you were working with, you're going to have to go outside your geographic area. Your family's just going to have to deal with that. I know if you have kids, especially little girls, they don't want to move. They don't want to leave their friends. If they're in junior high or high school, and that's a tough time. And what you may have to do is take on an interim assignments until they graduate from high school. And that interim assignment may lead to a permanent position. I've seen that happen all the time. But you're essentially commuting long distance for work. Sometimes that's what you have to do. But don't get too rigid. You've got to be flexible. That's a real key element to being successful, discipline and being flexible. But don't settle. Decide what you want and go for that. Now, if it gets prolonged and the finances get too strenuous, then you may have to settle. But don't start off by just taking the first thing that happens. Okay, I think we've run out of time today. I really have enjoyed being with you, and I hope you'll join us next Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time on YouTube, LinkedIn, and we hope probably not next week, but in the near future, we'll be also live streaming at johngself.com. This will be posted later today on our website. It'll be posted as a free course in our by tomorrow. It'll be posted as a free course in guiding your career off of our website, and it'll also be posted on YouTube. Thank you so much, and have a great day. And by the way, if you have any questions, or if you need to vent, or if you have any suggestions how we can make this better, email me at info@johngself.com.